The second part of today's lesson is rationalizing the denominator. This is not something that Math 2 requires anymore, and it does get fairly intricate as you get to upper level math courses, so I figured hitting the basics wasn't going to be such a bad idea, and it is going to be required for you whenever you are simplifying answers. The process of eliminating a radical from an expression's denominator is called rationalizing the denominator. What that means is that you're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator of a simplified answer, just like you can't have a decimal in a fraction. So we're going to learn how to eliminate that, and in order to eliminate it, the radical from a denominator of an expression, you must multiply the expression by an appropriate form of the number 1. So remember, you can multiply anything by 1. So you can always do 1 over 1, 1 over 100. I should not say 100. I should say 100 over 100, or the square root of 8 over the square root of 8. And we did this much earlier whenever we were doing proportionality or finding equivalent fractions. So to rationalize, number 1, you're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the radical in the denominator. Simplify until no radical sign is in the denominator. Simplify the numerator, then reduce the outside fractions. So starting with number 1, to get rid of the square root of 7, if I multiply it by itself, the square root of 7 times the square root of 7 is 7. To keep something equivalent, you have to multiply it by a form of 1, which would be also multiplying the top by the square root of 7, leaving you with 5 square root of 7. So we took care of number 1. We took care of number 2. Number 3, we can't simplify anything up top, so we're good to go. Number 4, make sure you can't simplify 5 and 7. So that's as far as this problem will take us. For example 2, square root of 6 times the square root of 6 would eliminate that radical. Square root of 6 times square root of 6 is 6. 7 times the square root of 6. Can't simplify the square root of 6. Can't simplify 7 over 6. And you want to leave it improper. You don't want to write 1 and the square root of 6 over 6. Just leave it like you see it. Number 3. Multiply again by square root of 6 over the square root of 6, just a form of 1. That leaves us with 12 square root of 6 over 6. You can't simplify anything up top because square root of 6 is good to go, but you can reduce the outside fractions. 12 over 6 simplifies to 2. Could show it if you need to. So it's 2 square root of 6, and it's technically over 1. Number 4, you're going to multiply by the whole radical, square root of 3b, square root of 3b. On the bottom, you would get 3b. On the top, you would just multiply the radicals together and leave it under the radical. 2 times 3 is 6, so 6 square root of 6b over 3b. Number 5, square root of 2 over the square root of 2 equals 6 square root of 2 over 2. Can't simplify the square root of 2, but I can simplify 6 over 2, so I have 3 square root of 2. And I did not move it over to show you. I apologize. This one was very similar to example 3. Example 6, I'm going to go ahead and simplify the top. Square root of 81 is 9 over the square root of 6. And then I'm going to multiply by my form of 1. So I have 9 square root of 6 over square root of 6 times square root of 6 is 6. 9 over 6, if we ignore the radical, they're both divisible by 3. So I'd have 3 over 2, but then I got to leave that square root of 6 up top. Example 7, multiply by your form of 1. That would leave me with 7 in the bottom, square root of 35 on top. 35 breaks down to the prime factors of 5 times 7, so there's nothing I can do to simplify that. And then the last little bit, times the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. So I have 3 square root of 3 over 3. Those 3's simplify, leaving me with the square root of 3. So those are pretty easy. If you go back to page 1 for me, originally I had planned to show you just how to simplify with division. For instance, for this one, I was going to have you do square root of 2 and then break 6 into the square root of 2 times the square root of 3. So then that cancels those square root of 2. That's like a form of 1, leaving you with 1 over square root of 3. And then if we were to follow through with our rules, times the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, we would get the square root of 3 over 3. This is where I intended to have you stop, and then I changed my mind. So this would be the final and best, most simplified answer, so that you don't have that radical in the denominator. I'll show you a different way you could have gone about it. You didn't have to simplify the way I did, where I took the square root of 2 out. You can just start from where you are, given, and multiply by the square root of 6, leaving you with the square root of 12 over 6. 12 breaks down into 4 times 3, and I can take the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 square root of 3 is left, over 6. 2 simplifies with 6. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 6 3 times, leaving me with a square root of 3 over 3. So you can see those answers match. So you can kind of go about it any way that you'd like. For this one, you do have the option to simplify first, because I know this is going to have the square root of 3 times the square root of 2, and this will be the square root of 3 times the square root of 5, and I'd have the square root of 3 and the square root of 3. You can also just multiply by the square root of 6 over the square root of 6. So the next question I always get is, do you have to do it times the 3 square root of 6? And you could do 3 square root of 6 over 3 square root of 6, because that's still a form of 1. But at the end of the day, you're going to have an extra factor of 3 on top and an extra factor of 3 on the bottom that you're just going to have to simplify anyways. So it doesn't matter that that 3 is down below. It's not under a radical, so it's not hurting anything. Just do it by the radical in the bottom. So this would be square root of 90 over 3 times 6. So square root of 6, square root of 6 is 6. 3 times 6 is 18. 90 breaks into 9 times 10. Square root of 9 is 3. So 3 square root of 10 over 18 equals square root of 10 over 6. For number 20, I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. In fact, I'm also going to simplify this right now. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have 4 square root of 3. So I did 4 times the square root of 3 over 8 times, remember this is going to equal 3, over 24. This simplifies. 4 goes into 4 once. 4 goes into 24 6 times. So I have the square root of 3 over 6. For 21, I can multiply by the square root of 35 on top and bottom, but if I think a little bit more flexibly, I have 14 and 35, and I know they both have a factor of 7. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of that, just to hopefully simplify it a bit. So I just broke it into factors. Square root of 7 times the square root of 2 is the same thing as square root of 14. Square root of 7 times the square root of 5 is the same thing as the square root of 35. The 7's cancel. Square root of 7 cancel. So I have square root of 2 over 3 square root of 5. And then to rationalize the denominator, multiplied by the square root of 5 on top and bottom. So that's the square root of 10 over 15. And there's nothing further that I could do. Last two at the bottom are just slightly different. The first one is distributive property, so it's just checking your ability to multiply. So I have 2 times the square root of 5 times 5. Community property says I can add in any order I want. So I'm going to do 2 times 5 first, and that's 10. Then I got to tag on square root of 5 minus This one's a little trickier because you got to keep up with a bunch of stuff. I have 2 times 5 on the outside, so that's 10. And then I have 5 times 5, or square root of 5 times the square root of 5, which is 5. Then real quick to simplify, 10 square root of 5 minus 50. And the last one is a difference of squares. Hopefully you recognized, actually I'm taking that back because this term is not the same. So this we're going to have to FOIL. First, you multiply the first terms, multiply the outer terms, multiply the inner terms, and multiply the last. So let's start with first. Square root of 6 times the square root of 6 is 6. Outer, square root of 6 times 3 square root of 3. So that means I would have plus 3 square root of 18. Inner, be careful because you got this negative, minus square root of 3 times the square root of 6 is the square root of 18. Last terms, negative square root of 3 times 3 square root of 3. So I'm going to put my minus. And then it would be 3 times square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. So if I simplify by kind of combining like terms, let's see. I have 6 plus 3 square root of 18 minus the square root of 18 is 2 square root of 18. And then minus 9, which is negative 3 plus 2 square root of 18. Be mindful that you might have one last step to simplify, and here we do, because the square root of 18 is 9 times 2. So I have negative 3. I'm going to pull out the square root of 9, which is 3. So 6 square root of 2. And you can have those reversed. It could be 6 square root of 2 minus 3.